Jacob Morgan, a celebrated tech entrepreneur, stood at the center of his opulent wedding reception, his tailored suit catching the light of the crystal chandeliers above. Beside him was Serena, his new wife, a striking, ambitious marketing executive who had become an integral part of both his company and his life. The reception was the event of the year, brimming with laughter and champagne, with the city's elite gathered to toast their union. To everyone around them, they were the picture of success and perfection. Yet as Jacob stepped away from the crowd for a moment of solitude, something, or someone, caught his eye. A server moved quietly through the room, clearing plates and refilling glasses. Her uniform was plain, her hair pulled back in a simple bun, but there was something hauntingly familiar about her. Then she turned, and Jacob's world froze. It was Grace, his ex-wife. She looked different, her face thinner, her expression hardened by time, but unmistakably, it was her. And then he saw it, the unmistakable curve of her pregnant belly. 1,000 questions flooded his mind. What was she doing here? Why hadn't she told him? And most importantly, was it his? Jacob Morgan and Grace had once been the kind of couple people admired. They had met during their final year of college, drawn together by shared dreams of building a better future. Jacob was a visionary, brimming with ideas for a tech startup that he believed could change the world. Grace, on the other hand, was the grounding force he needed: practical, compassionate, and deeply loyal. When they graduated, they chose to take a leap of faith. Grace worked full-time as a schoolteacher, supporting them financially, while Jacob poured every ounce of energy into his fledgling company. Their life was modest, marked by long nights of hard work and whispered conversations about the life they were building together. Grace often sacrificed her own aspirations to make Jacob's dreams possible, believing in his potential even when success seemed like a distant hope. And then, Jacob's company took off. Almost overnight, their fortunes changed. The startup gained traction, attracting investors and eventually becoming one of the most promising tech ventures in the industry. With success came money, recognition, and a lifestyle they had never imagined. They moved into a modern penthouse, traveled to exotic destinations, and indulged in luxuries that once felt unattainable. For a while, it felt like a dream come true. Jacob and Grace celebrated his achievements together, both basking in the glow of their shared victory. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair, a tribute to their love rather than Jacob's newfound wealth. But as Jacob's career soared, so did the demands on his time. Late nights at the office became routine, and business trips piled on. The man who used to prioritize time with Grace now seemed consumed by his growing empire. Their evenings, once filled with laughter and connection, turned into quiet silences, punctuated by Jacob's distracted glances at his phone. Grace noticed the changes before Jacob did. Though she tried to adapt and rationalize his behavior, the distance between them grew, slowly eroding the foundation of their once strong bond. The cracks in Jacob and Grace's marriage deepened with the arrival of Serena Lewis, a sharp and confident marketing executive who joined Jacob's company during a major expansion phase. From the beginning, Serena stood out. She was not only brilliant at her job, but also possessed a magnetic charm that drew people in effortlessly. At first, Grace viewed Serena as just another colleague in Jacob's growing circle, but it wasn't long before her presence began to feel unsettling. Serena attended meetings, traveled with Jacob on business trips, and became a constant in his daily life. Jacob often spoke of her with admiration. Her innovative ideas, her strategic mind, and her ability to navigate high-stakes negotiations. Grace tried to brush off her unease, telling herself that Jacob's enthusiasm for Serena was purely professional. But the subtle shifts in their relationship were impossible to ignore. Jacob started coming home later and later, often citing last-minute work commitments. On the rare nights he was home, his focus was elsewhere, and their conversations became superficial and brief. The breaking point came on their 5th wedding anniversary. Grace, determined to rekindle the connection they once shared, spent the entire day preparing a special dinner. She cooked Jacob's favorite dishes, lit candles, and even wore the red dress he used to love. But Jacob never showed up. Hours later, he walked through the door, wearing a sleek suit, his cologne mingled with the scent of champagne. Grace's heart sank as he casually mentioned attending an important corporate event with Serena. What began as quiet disappointment erupted into a heated argument. Grace, overwhelmed by years of neglect and frustration, accused Jacob of prioritizing Serena and his career over their marriage. Jacob, defensive and exhausted, retaliated, claiming everything he had done was for her. The argument ended with Grace packing a small bag and walking out the door. Jacob didn't stop her. 6 months after their divorce, Jacob Morgan stood at his glamorous wedding reception beside Serena. The evening was a spectacle of luxury, with glittering chandeliers, elegantly dressed guests, and champagne flowing endlessly. To the outside world, Jacob appeared to be the epitome of success. Charming, accomplished, and now married to a woman who matched his ambition and charisma. Yet, beneath the polished exterior, Jacob couldn't shake a lingering emptiness. As the night unfolded, he found himself stepping away from the crowd, seeking a brief moment of solitude. That was when he saw her. Moving discreetly among the guests, a server in a plain black uniform cleared plates and refilled glasses. Her movements were deliberate, her posture subdued, but something about her struck him as familiar. When she turned, her face briefly illuminated by the soft glow of the chandeliers, Jacob felt the air leave his lungs. It was Grace. Her features were sharper now, her expression more guarded, but there was no mistaking her. And then his eyes fell to her rounded belly, unmistakably swollen with the weight of new life. Jacob's mind reeled. The timeline of their separation raced through his thoughts. Could the child be his? Why hadn't she told him? Overwhelmed, Jacob crossed the room to confront her. Grace froze when she saw him, her face a mix of shock and dread. "Grace," he whispered, his voice barely steady. "You're pregnant. Is it mine?" She met his gaze, her voice steady yet cold. "I'm working, Jacob." "What does it look like?" And with that, she turned away, leaving Jacob grappling with a storm of emotions he hadn't felt in years. Jacob couldn't let it go. The sight of Grace, pregnant and working as a server, haunted him for days after the wedding. He replayed their brief exchange in his mind, questioning how things had unraveled so completely and why she hadn't told him about the baby. Determined to find answers, Jacob used a contact at the venue to track down her employment records. A few days later, he stood in front of a modest apartment building, clutching grocery bags and unsure if he even had the right to be there. When Grace opened the door, her expression hardened instantly. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone flat and unwelcoming. "I brought you some groceries," Jacob said awkwardly, holding up the bags like a peace offering. "I don't need your help," she replied, crossing her arms. "I know," he admitted softly, "but I want to help anyway." After a tense pause, Grace reluctantly stepped aside, letting him into the small apartment. Jacob's heart tightened as he took in the sight of the crib in the corner, a pile of neatly folded baby clothes on the couch, and an ultrasound photo pinned to the fridge. It was a far cry from the life they'd once shared, and the weight of his absence hit him hard. Grace remained guarded, keeping their conversation short and to the point. But Jacob's resolve only grew stronger. Over the next few weeks, he began showing up unannounced, each time with something in hand: groceries, baby supplies, or takeout from her favorite restaurant. He didn't push for long conversations or demand forgiveness. He simply showed up. At first, Grace was furious. She hated that he thought he could waltz back into her life, and she resented the flicker of hope she felt whenever he smiled at her. But Jacob's persistence slowly began to chip away at her walls. The turning point came when Jacob asked to attend one of her doctor's appointments. After weeks of hesitation, Grace reluctantly agreed. Sitting beside her in the small exam room, Jacob held his breath as the technician turned on the monitor. The sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, fast, steady, and alive. "That's the baby?" Jacob whispered, his voice trembling. "Our baby," Grace corrected softly, glancing at him. She saw something unexpected in his eyes. Tears. "This doesn't mean I've forgiven you," she said, pulling her hand away when he instinctively reached for it. "I know," he replied, wiping his eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to be here." For the first time, Grace began to wonder if he truly meant it. She saw him out of the corner of her eye. As Jakob grew more involved in Grace's life, he began to reflect on the events that had driven them apart. Memories of Serena's surfaced, her constant presence, her subtle remarks about Grace, and the way she seemed to always appear when his marriage was at its weakest. The more he thought about it, the less it all made sense. One afternoon, while organizing old company files, Jacob stumbled upon an archived email chain involving Serena and one of his former assistants. The tone of the emails felt off, too personal, too calculated. One message in particular gnawed at him. Instructions from Serena to filter distractions from his personal life during a critical project. Jacob's stomach twisted as he remembered how abruptly Grace had stopped trying to communicate with him near the end of their marriage. Determined to uncover the truth, Jacob tracked down the former assistant Megan, who had quietly left the company after his divorce. At first, Megan was hesitant to talk, but Jacob's persistence wore her down. "She didn't like Grace," Megan admitted, her voice low. "Serena said Grace didn't belong in your world, that she was holding you back." Jacob's chest tightened as Megan continued. "Serena had me intercept emails and messages from Grace. She said it was for your own good, to keep you focused. And there was a letter." Jacob's brows furrowed. "What letter?" Megan hesitated before handing him a USB drive. "Grace wrote you this long, emotional letter. Serena told me to make sure you never saw it. I saved the emails and files, just in case." Back at his penthouse, Jacob plugged in the drive. The evidence was damning. Intercepted messages, Serena's instructions, and even audio clips of her bragging about how easily she had manipulated him. That evening, Jacob confronted Serena in their lavish living room. "Did you sabotage my marriage?" he demanded, his voice cold and controlled. Serena's polished facade faltered. "I didn't sabotage anything," she said, crossing her arms. "You and Grace were falling apart. I just sped things along." Jacob's voice rose. "You lied to me. You manipulated me. You destroyed my family." Serena's mask slipped completely, her voice dripping with venom. "You're welcome. Grace wasn't good enough for you, Jacob. I made you the man you are today." Jacob stared at her in disgust. "You didn't make me. You ruined me." After exposing Serena's lies and manipulation, Jacob took swift action. He presented the evidence to the company board, ensuring Serena was removed from her position and stripped of her shares. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Serena's reputation crumbled as the truth leaked to the media, painting her as a ruthless opportunist who had destroyed Jacob's first marriage. By the time the dust settled, Serena was left with nothing but the echoes of her former glory. For Jacob, the ordeal was a wake-up call. He stepped back from his company, delegating responsibilities to a trusted team so he could focus on rebuilding what truly mattered: his family. But repairing the damage he had done was no simple task. Grace remained cautious, keeping her walls firmly in place. She allowed Jacob into her life only because of the baby, drawing clear boundaries to protect herself from further heartbreak. Yet Jacob didn't falter. He showed up every day, whether it was assembling baby furniture, bringing over groceries, or simply being present when Grace needed him. When their child was born, a baby boy with Jacob's bright eyes and Grace's warm smile, the moment felt like a new beginning. Jacob held the tiny newborn in his arms, overwhelmed by emotion as tears welled in his eyes. Grace stood in the doorway, watching silently. Her expression was guarded, but for the first time in years, there was a flicker of hope. "You have a lot to prove, Jacob," she said softly. Jacob met her gaze, his voice steady. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving it, Grace. For both of you." And so, though they were far from perfect, there was a glimmer of redemption, a chance to rebuild what had been lost and create a better future together.